County Council's meeting of the Executive today, on 7th of June. Hope you all had a enjoyable weekend of celebrations for Her Majesty. And we did have various events, including a very successful event at the castle on Thursday night in the Beacons. So that was very good. So can we start with apologies for absence then, please, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Leader. We have apologies from Councillor Mrs Bradwell. However, she is observing virtually on Teams.
Thank you. Okay, any further? Any officer apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from Glenn Garrard and from Heather Sandy as well.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest from councillors? Not seeing any. Thank you for that. Any announcements then? Thank you. Have we any announcements from members of the Executive? Seeing any? So we'll proceed then. Thank you for that. So then we move on to the minutes of the meeting of this Executive, which was held on the 4th of May. Is it your wish I sign these as a true and accurate record? Is that agreed? Thank you. So then we move on to item 5, which is the approval to procure contracts for temporary staff. Thank you. So, Councillor Troy, do you want to just introduce us?
Yeah. Thank you, Leader. It's become necessary to obviously extend the process of recruitment of temporary staff and for a further 3 months. So we're asking for permission to do that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, who's talking to us?
We'll pass to Claire Vickers, who's the HR representative for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. The Council's current contracts for temporary agency staff expire on the 4th of September of this year, with no further options for us to extend. We are seeking support for a short extension of 3 months to the existing agency staffing contract and the procurement of a new contract utilising the ESPO MSTAR3 framework. We currently have a contract with Retinue for our social care and social workers, and that contract equated to £3.5 million last year, and Commensurate for our general posts, which was approximately £1.5 million also last year. We are proposing to have 2 contracts moving forward, one for social care and one for general posts, which includes our legal roles, on an initial contract term of 2 years, with 3 further 1-year extensions to a maximum contract term of 5 years. So this contract period is in line with our current contract length, and it will ensure that the contract terms remains aligned with our people strategy. So between April 21 and March 22, the Council spent approximately £5 million on temporary agency resource, and this includes all on-costs except for our pension contributions, which are paid for by the agencies. And 70% of that total spend is in relation to qualified and unqualified social workers, and it's widely recognised that there is a national shortage of social workers and other key roles within the Council. So the Council's ability to recruit and retain staff in these high-risk areas does appear as risk number 7 on the Strategic Risk Register, and we have developed new and developing controls to mitigate this risk, and that includes the launch of our People Strategy 2021 to 2024, and that includes a focus on recruiting and retaining skill to enable current and future delivery of our services within Lincolnshire. In consideration of that approach, though, we are looking to grow our own, and in 2020-21 we employed 13 children's social worker apprentices and 14 in 21-22, and we did also take 4 trainee lawyers across the same period. So in 21-22 we used on average 116 agency staff per month, which was 2.18% of the Council's employed staff. And during this period, there's been a significant migration of qualified care staff away from the Council, and updated figures show there were 79 leavers and only 32 starters in the care qualified category in this term. The Council has been able to recruit more unqualified, however this has still resulted in a shortfall of 50 staff, and therefore agency was required. Whilst most of our agency staff categories are paid at the same rate as the equivalent employee of the Council, we did have 86 people within social care lawyers and senior lawyers and family learning tutors that are currently being paid above this rate. and this is due to the difficulty for the council to compete with the agency pay rates within these roles. There is a difference of £18 an hour for social workers and up to 30 for senior lawyers. But overall, within the contract year, our agency fees amounted to just short of £350,000, which was 7% of our total contract cost. Leanne's just now going to provide you a short update on the procurement requests.
Thank you. So the Managed Services for Temporary Agency Resource, MSTAR 3, has 14 providers under the managed service lot which we would use. As the scale of our requirement is significant, we would need to engage with a market provider who has the capacity and the experience to manage this, and the market leaders within the industry are included on the MSTAR 3 framework. So this includes Hayes, Manpower, Matrix, Reed, and our incumbents, Retinue and Commensurate. The main changes that we're proposing for the new contracts include a statement of works option to enable the council to onboard suppliers of specialist professional services, such as audit services. So this will benefit the council as there will be a reduction in off-contract spend, which poses a risk to the council as the rates will be higher and there is a risk of high costs from agency fees or finder's fees. We are also taking a collaborative approach with Rutland and South Kesteven, although as LCC is the largest spend, it will be our requirements that we contract on. However, each council will have their own contract and will be responsible for the contract management of it. A 3-month extension will lengthen the implementation period from 6 to 18 weeks, which we know from market engagement will make the council's requirement more attractive to providers and will enable local agencies to be onboarded. And this is permissible within the Public Contract Regulations 2015 under Regulation 72. The performance management for the contract is based on the framework mechanism, and whilst there are no financial penalties for not achieving the service levels, they are linked to the defaulting performance clauses, and not achieving the stated measures for more than 2 consecutive periods will allow the council to take whatever action it deems necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. All finished? Thank you very much. The scrutiny comments have been circulated, and Councillor Parker, I'm sure will just expand on that.
Sure, thank you. As has been said, during our meeting we did recognise the work being done to attract and retain staff, but felt that more could be and needed to be done to reduce the £5 million spend on agency staff. Looking across the piece, as it were, in relation to each of the key areas where we are having difficulty in recruiting, that's adult social care and children's services and legal services, that we've got just under between 11 and 12% of the staff that are working in those areas are agency staff. I think the point that we wanted to bring forward was that more information is needed and more priority needs to be given to reducing the agency staff, and more needs to be done to attract and retain staff. We were not critical about what's happening at the moment, but we wanted something to be done, a framework, the attraction and retention framework should set out clear proposals to help reduce the agency spend, because we felt as though that money could be better used elsewhere if we could spend more of our time on trying to grow our own. So they were the set of proposals that we wanted to be taken away and brought back by officers to a later meeting of OSMB.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for that. Right, yes, I mean, obviously there's 2 issues here. That one is obviously the issue with hiring temporary staff, and it's although the figures would appear to be large, I think sometimes members of the public forget how large this organisation is. As it says on paragraph 5 there, it actually amounts to 2% of the total workforce. So I think most reasonable, I would say that is a reasonable figure for an organisation of our size. I think we've also got to remember that we are in almost an unprecedented challenging situation at the moment, with a national shortage of labour, particularly skilled labour. We've seen all the television viewings over the weekend of people stuck in airports or not cancelling flights, and also anything you want to do now, restaurants, you name it, there does seem to be everybody saying that there is a real desperate shortage of staff. And Chief Executive had one of our regular meetings with all public sector colleagues a couple of weeks ago, and the one theme that was coming out, everybody was saying we cannot get staff, we're struggling to retain staff, and we're even more struggling to recruit staff. So I think this figure of 2%, I think pragmatically will rise, because as in the report it said the pandemic did stabilise things for a while, but now we seem to have come out of that and we are in a very volatile situation. So I think the situation will continue, but I think it was a very interesting debate at Overview Scrutiny about what we can do in terms of reducing the number if possible, and growing our own, and things like that. So I suppose the executive would appreciate a bit more detail on that in terms of what we can do, but also just a bit more flesh on the bones in terms of what the changes are in the contract, which you hope, Andrew, will make it better.
So, thanks, Leader. I'll lead off, and I might ask Claire or Alison to come in on the back of what I've said. So, Councillor Parker rightly mentioned the attraction and retention framework that we've put in place in recent months, which and indeed I've referred to it in previous versions of this meeting as well, around different steps and measures and flexibilities that we can put in place to ensure we can retain and attract permanent members of staff, not agency members of staff. Whether that's related to longer term actions around being more flexible about how we secure graduates, apprenticeships and what have you, or shorter term measures around things such as retention payments or what have you. I think just to add to what you'd said, Leader, about the national environment locally as well, and particularly if we're looking at social workers being a significant chunk of that £5 or £6 million that we're currently spending on agency at the moment. There are specific local challenges around an inflationary local market around social workers related to other councils being in inadequate Ofsted ratings, as an example, whereby the natural inclination is to throw money at the challenge sometimes, and that can have a knock-on impact on the expectation and vacancies at our own council. So it is a challenging environment, but we are putting measures in place. I think to address one of Councillor Parker's other comments, apprenticeships and graduates don't grow on trees. You don't naturally just they don't naturally come in and suddenly take on an average social worker casework load, for example. They need to be built up, have that skill and pastoral care that's passed on over the period of their training. But as I say, we are doing everything we can do. I'll see if Claire wants or Alison wants to add anything to that in terms of the framework, if that's okay.
Thank you, Andrew. No, I think that summarises our focus from people strategy. Attraction and retention framework is our highest priority in people strategy at the moment. Our year 2 projects is going to be very much focused on the grow your own, and as Andrew says, particularly around the apprenticeship work experience, work placement graduate. So that's a high priority for us. And in terms of the contract itself, we are making sure that within the specification we are focusing very heavily on the quality of the agency workers coming through, and there is an element of requirement from the providers to work with us to address our hard to recruits and their proposals and ways that can be managed to ensure the agency workers are readily available for us. And we are introducing a scheme of works that opens that up to wider approaches to our short-term requirements around agency. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the numbers are quite startling, actually, aren't they, in terms of the variation in costs? Are we doing some work, or do you know, perhaps Andrew, what would the cost implication be if we paid these staff directly at the rates that they are getting in the open market? Because we're clearly, particularly for social workers and on the legal side, vastly underpaying them compared to the market rate, aren't we?
Yeah, I haven't got those figures to hand, Councillor, so I'd have to come back with something.
I think that needs to be part of the question. Yeah. My second query, if I may, is there an attraction in terms of length of time of service? Are people going to work for agencies so they can move around more, or are they, in essence, you know, just going to work for an agency, coming back to the next day, doing exactly the same job, staying around and working the same way, or is there does agency work enable them to get a bit more variation or something, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
What we've found with the agency workers that we've got currently, especially in children's social care, is that they tend to be longer term. So they're not moving around as such. They're plugging some of the longer term gaps that we've got. And unfortunately at the moment we've got some retention issues where we are losing some of our own social workers to go and work with agencies because the pay is so much better. So it's at the moment, and as the leader's already said, with the labour market, it's just a perfect storm. Yeah.
I think there's an issue there in terms of it can't be good to have people long term as agency, and I know it's not easy, but there must be, and also in terms of, it's all right talking about, and I think this was raised at over your scrutiny, yes, you train people and bring graduates on, but what you don't want them to just buzz off somewhere else, because we've done, so explain what is legally possible in terms of a contract, if you like, with, you know, people coming, you know, which we support to get trained up, how we can make sure that we get to the organisation or the taxpayer gets, local taxpayer gets benefit from it.
It's certainly something that we'll look at as part of the wider attraction retention framework, and the work that we're doing along with graduates and apprentices to make sure that once we've trained them we benefit from that and they don't move elsewhere as well.
Sorry. I mean, this is just not happening to us. This is happening in the hospitals and everywhere, and that is the issue that we have when the hospitals say they haven't got any staff because they're all going to agencies because they are paying more. But it's the flexibility that they've got. They can choose to work Monday to Friday instead of Saturday and Sunday. And unfortunately, with COVID, people have said, well, I want a better lifestyle. I don't want to be working for, as Rich has just said, £17 an hour if I can get double it. £34 an hour, but work 2 days a week instead of 4 days a week. So it is a huge challenge. I mean, in adult care and the OTs, for instance, we are growing our own, as you say, and also we're looking at OTs that if we can not have a qualified OT, but have probably what we would call a half-trained OT to do the same work, we're looking at doing that as well. But it's the doctor surgeries as well. They're taking our social workers, they're taking our OTs. So it is a huge problem, but it isn't just with us, but how we solve it, I don't know.
The risk is that everybody will, you know, you're in a vicious circle and you'll end up totally reliant on agency workers, but it can't just be us who deals with it, but collectively you've got to draw the line. But you know, it cannot be good practice to have people for years just as an agency person, and you're paying them and you're paying the agency fee as well. So I'm not saying it's easy, but we've got to work out, I suppose it's collectively, nationally, that we've somehow got to work through this, haven't we? Do you want to come in?
Thank you very much. So just a couple of comments, really. In terms of the Grow Your Own, and we've got a really thriving Grow Your Own in adult care and in children's services, particularly around social work and OTs. We've been advised that there isn't any legal ability to put a financial clause and contract in place for somebody to remain with us at the end of their apprenticeship. However, in reality, what we've seen is that 100% of people have stayed because they tend to be from Lincolnshire and are settled in Lincolnshire. They know us, they know the authority, they like working here, they're settled, their family are here, and their children go to school here. So the reality is that the Grow Your Own programmes are highly successful and people do tend to stay with us, but they take 3 years in order for people to come to fruition, so it is a slow burn. There is a lot of work going on lobbying nationally around the social work crisis in particular, particularly within children's, and clearly the challenge around the agency I think is a really strong one. So if I just give an example of something, so local authorities get their licence, they're nationally licensed through a national system that's set up by the government in order for them to practice. If that was a local licence only given out by local authorities, then local authorities would be able to, because they're predominantly the employer of particularly children's social workers, then obviously you could much more accurately balance the agency market in terms of how many and who you would license to practice in your area. But that isn't something that nationally they want to consider at this moment in time, but might be something that we wish to lobby on.
Mrs Bradwell, I think Councillor Bradwell wants to come in on the screen.
Yeah, just quickly to say that, as has already been said, that this is a national issue, but I just wanted to assure my colleagues that actually the East Midlands, I chair the lead members meeting in the East Midlands, and all the lead members, supported by our DCSs, we've written to the DFE to, explain how this is affecting our children's services at this moment in time, and wanting them to understand the costs that local authorities are under, because actually at the moment there is no fix, but obviously, as we all know, funding is not a finite pot of money, so we have done that, and actually just after this meeting I'm just going on to an LGA Children's Board as well, and this is again one of the things that the Children's Board will be discussing today. We've got the a big paper on social care, and I know there's a representative from across the country on that board, and I know that again we've got someone from the DFE, and this will be raised again today. And I know that's not getting a fix, but I think it is about keep highlighting this, because we do need to do something, because everyone's agreeable in the meeting today.
Thank you for that. Any further comments, please, Councillor Davey?
Thanks, Leader. Firstly, I think in terms of the general picture, you're absolutely right. The percentage is quite small in terms of agency use compared to the size of the organisation, but we all recognise we've got very, very major challenges ahead. Workforce is going to be the biggest challenge, not just for this organisation, but for this country in the next decade. And with falling populations, ageing demographics, the global forecasting models tell us that we've got a real challenge ahead, quite clearly. Obviously, grow your own is absolutely the right way forward, but it is a very slow burn, and retention is the problem. So the question really is about the package we offer people. We all know Lincolnshire is a great place to live in, a great place to work in, great opportunities, great education, all of that. But housing is going to be the big challenge, in my view, for a lot of our workforce, bearing in mind the wages we pay compared to the cost now with rising interest rates next year, with mortgages, etc. So what work is going on about the package that we offer people, particularly keeping people once we've got them trained and ready to go, because that's going to be our challenge, retention. I think having those programs is absolutely the right way forward, but retaining people is going to be the bigger challenge.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. Thanks, Leader. It just builds on what I was saying about the attraction and retention framework in some respects, where we've got challenges in particular, because it's not across the board. I think that's the most important point to make. Whilst we say about the agency being a small proportion, there aren't retention problems across the board of the council. That there are specific areas, and the framework does give that flexibility to services within their budgetary means to be able to provide retention support where it's required. I think you're right to say about making great play on Lincolnshire being a great place, to work, live and visit, and we are absolutely do follow that up in the way that we market our roles in the council. You're right, as a council we're a great place to work. I think the most recent employee survey shows our employees see that, which is why people do in the main stay, and that those retention or challenges that we talk about are isolated into certain places. But as you say, it's a repeat of the message always in whatever we do in terms of our marketing and marketing the council in terms of new roles and what have you. So, but I'd agree it's a really important thing to look at.
Could I just add, Leader, I wonder if there's any challenges around education, because if you look at the American forecasting model, they're saying that a third of all teachers are going to quit by September and going to agency there. Are we getting the same challenges on education?
And so the challenge within education is the growth of personal tuition. So there's been a huge investment put into personal tuition, so it's incredibly difficult to get tutors because teachers are leaving the profession to go into tutoring to offer that freedom and flexibility that Councillor Bowkett was talking about. So we are seeing a move away, but not necessarily just completely out of the profession, so not been lost, but put into private tutoring instead.
Any further comments, questions? Yes, Councillor Woody.
Thank you, Leader. I think the Chief Executive has partially answered the question I was going to ask you around the Lincolnshire being as big as it is. Are we able to offer satellite learning, particularly in the social work arena, around qualifications, as far as might not just be necessary to come into Lincoln to the university, but Stamford, Gainsborough, out on the coast? Is that opportunity there, or are you coming up against the same problem around the tutoring side of things, that it's getting the professionals in the first place to come along and teach said students?
Thank you. So there's a number of routes to become a qualified social worker. One is the apprenticeship, which we know of, which is 1 day a week at university, and that is at Lincoln, and is only available in county, in Lincoln. And so we have apprenticeships across the whole of the county, but obviously 1 day a week they have to go to the university because it's not available on any of the other satellite. There wouldn't really be enough numbers to be able to run it on a sort of satellite basis neither. There's then obviously sort of fast track approach to social work. So Frontline is one of the programmes. Again, that's available at Lincoln, and the same challenge arises that there wouldn't really be the sort of concentration in numbers. But the programme is a master's level programme, so it is through either Lincoln or Sheffield or one of the others.
Thank you. I think we covered most of the things I was going to say, but one of the other things is I'm very keen, obviously, to get the apprenticeships in and the people in, and legal services have been doing quite well with that over the last 3 to 4 years, and they continue to annually employ apprenticeships. One of the things that maybe stops us pushing for more apprentices is that part of that is obviously on the learning on the job, so to speak, and while if the more apprentices you need, the more obviously time that takes from the actual employee doing their day job. So it's a very difficult balance, and it's one that I think we are starting to get right, but obviously it's a case of working through that and getting that right balance and getting the people and retaining the people. So we've been talking all this morning about further measures we can put in place with the HR team, and I've circulated some of them with the exec this morning via email. So it's definitely something that we are very much aware of and very much looking to keep focused on over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah. Quite a big challenge there, and I think Overview and Scrutiny are going to be looking at this again. And I think, to me, there is this danger that more is this sort of trend towards agency and working. Is it inevitable? And I think that because we don't want to end up like the health service, which suffer from this particular issue with locums. Because I think it's a balance between having a steady job with a very good pension and good terms and conditions, but on the other side of the balance is potentially you could be earning more money, and as Councillor Bowkett says, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of your lifestyle. And I think at the moment, to a lot of people, the balance is probably on the latter rather than the former. So I just think whether it's an issue of sort of publicity, if you like, or sort of explaining to everybody, because if you haven't got because people often underestimate the power of having a good pension is pretty, and probably when you're 20, it doesn't seem that important, but when you're 50, suddenly it does. So I think, you know, maybe some publicity around it, but also what are the measures we can take, either individually or collectively, to try and push back on that would be, I think, very helpful. So I'm sure the Overview Scrutiny Committee will want to look at that thing amongst other things. Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Sorry, just to come back. One of the other things was the recruitment and how we can look at fast-tracking that and making it streamlined and simpler. And obviously keeping the people that have applied for the job informed about where we are in the process and the dates that we're looking at. Because what we have found is certain people have accepted other jobs elsewhere prior to us going through our process. So we obviously looking at and aware of that, and are looking at ways that we can, you know, communicate with the applicants and make sure that we can get our teams and the managers that are looking at shortlisting to do that in a timely way, so we're not missing out on potential candidates coming to work for the council.
That would be very sensible, and you know, there's actually no need to have an end date as long as people know there's a start with that. And this is a disadvantage to wait until a date we've set to do anything is probably not necessary these days. Okay, I've got the recommendations there on page 5, which is the approval of the new contracts, and approve an extension to the 3 months to the current contracts, and delegates as usual for any of the details. So all those in favour of that recommendation, please show. Thank you. I don't think there's any against. And thank you for that. Thank you for the information. So we then move on to the next item, final item, which is the final part of the post-SERCO contract, which comes to an end next year. So this is a bundle of stuff which really we need to decide on the way forward in terms of how HR, Payroll, Exchequer, Adult Care Finance and Customer Service Centre are proposals as to how they may be delivered in future. So, Andrew, are you leading on this? Quite a lot in this paper, so obviously Overview Scrutiny had a very good look at it. Sophie, is it, or Andrew?
Thank you, Leader. I'll just briefly introduce, just to emphasise what you said, really. It's such a massive and important piece of work that we've been undertaking over recent months to get to this position, to share some recommendations and proposals with you today about taking forward some of these vital back office corporate support functions that we've got, including the Customer Service Centre and Payroll. I think it's probably safe to say that Sophie, myself and the team that have supported this have been living and breathing this for many months now, and hopefully that comes across in the well-reasoned and what we feel is a well-reasoned and rational set of recommendations for you. So I'll let Sophie go into those in a bit more detail for you, if that's okay.
Overview Scrutiny, do you want to do it in bite-sized chunks, give an overview, and then we'll go through each section? I think that'll work probably best. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So the Corporate Support Services contract comes to an end in March 2024. What we're asking you in this report is to approve the recommissioning recommendations that's taken place in relation to the services we've just outlined. Also, because of the overlap with the CSC, the Executive is also being asked to approve the way forward for digital transformation. We last looked at delivery models in 2012. At that point, multi-stream service contracts were still popular, like the SERCO contract and the Mouchel contract before it. That model has now fallen out of favour with both the market and councils because there are no further savings to be had from it. Helpfully, government has issued some advice recently on the different relative merits of outsourcing and insourcing models. And you'll see when you've looked at the report, having looked at the report, that we've had regard to that advice in relation as we've worked through the options for each service. In summary, the advantages of outsourcing is that it provides management capacity to concentrate on core activity rather than support services. It provides efficiency benefits when providers are operating at scale, and it can also bring innovation into Lincolnshire that has been developed on other provider accounts. Conversely, the advantages of insourcing are primarily agility and control, as we can manage change without having to negotiate that through a contract. Insourcing also provides benefits when there are synergies with services already delivered by the council, enabling the removal of duplication. The government advice that's referred to in the report makes it very clear that insourcing is challenging, particularly when services have been outsourced for a considerable period of the time, as they have been in Lincolnshire. The advice says we shouldn't do too much at once, and instead we should prioritise those areas where we are very confident we can deliver the services, but also where the most benefit is to be had. So what I'm proposing to do now is just to go into the first section of the services, which was around HR, administration and payroll. The report makes it clear that our payrolls are complex. We haven't, and makes it clear that we haven't delivered them for over 20 years. We're also anticipating a great deal of commissioning change to deliver arising out of the expiry of the Serco contract, and for these reasons an insourcing is not recommended. There isn't a commercial marketplace for the payroll and HR admin services on their own, so instead the recommended option is a shared service arrangement with Hoople, who can provide the services to us without having to go through a competitive tender process. And they've agreed to provide those services at cost, so they're not intended to make a profit markup, and that's because we are a member of Hoople. Any provider has to use Business World on to deliver the services. That's our HR and finance system, and Hoople are expert in that system, and we are working with us on a project to move the councils to Hoople's Business World build. Because of that project work, Hoople already understand our payrolls, including the fire payroll, and we have expert advice that Hoople can deliver our payroll and HR admin services, which gives us reassurance. I'll pause there to see if you've got any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, do you want to do the same in bite-sized chunks?
Yeah, sure. We examined the shared services agreement and supported the recommendation that was set out for the shared services agreement. One question that was raised, which was in relation to trying to offer work to local businesses. Lincolnshire, a county council, offering work to Lincolnshire businesses, but that was not an option because of the size of the contract. It meant the need for a tendering process. We accepted the argument that insourcing was too challenging, and the point that was made just by Sophie about not having done certain key tasks since 2000. By contrast, Hoople have got experienced staff, and the risk is minimised by continuing with the new approach of a shared service agreement with Hoople. So we supported it.
Thank you. Okay, questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome the paper. I hope that whichever solution we choose, we have particular regard to the anomalies thrown up by Fire and Rescue Service, which has its own particular challenges. So I'd like to know that whichever route we go down, and when we're building this model, that we have due detailed regard to that. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, obviously there are, in previous discussions, there are various national providers who provide, not only for, because obviously fire and rescue is a bit different, because there are standalone fire and rescue fire authorities, and there are some like us who are embedded within the council. So because they're embedded within the council, yeah, to be fair, that has made it more complicated, but my understanding, and I don't know whether Andrew or Andrew's coming, there are national, and Hoople are looking at national providers to help them with the expertise they will need just to deliver on that, because also, we also, as we are aware, there are a lot of part-time staff in fire and rescue, which does make it a bit more complicated than others. So if you want to just answer that, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Corey. Yeah, there's a couple of layers of assurance on that, actually. So first and foremost is the actual build process that we're going through on the new ERP system, particularly with the payroll build that Hoople are a key part of in terms of providing that system to us in future. Just by way of update, for the executive, the payroll parallel running testing for all of that process, particularly on the fire side of things, is looking really positive, and that system will go live next April, and we're confident that that's looking good at the moment, particularly in terms of fire. In terms of supplementing their payroll expertise, as the leader said, working with other providers and other services that provide payroll to other fire authorities to supplement their knowledge. So yeah, we've got those bases covered as part of the discussions that we've been having with Hoople.
Any further? I mean, obviously there was raised, as Councillor Parker said, about the increasing size of Hoople, although they are a very good provider, and there's been a lot of just go through the assurance we've taken to make sure that they can do the job, and although their size will probably double, you're confident that they will be able to pick up the extra work.
Yes, we are confident about that. We carried out a detailed due diligence exercise of Hoople in 2018, and once the decision is made today by Executive, we will repeat the elements of due diligence that was carried out, and that was looking at their financial records, taking references from all of the customers that they provide services to. It was looking at their audit reports, insurance arrangements, business continuity arrangements, whether there's any litigation outstanding against them. We've already had some references back in relation to Hoople from this request, and they've all been positive, but we'll start the due diligence exercise thoroughly once the decision has been taken, because acting on the decision will be subject to that due diligence coming back as we expect it to. Just probably to give you a little bit more assurance around the fire service, I think that because the council is offering accommodation, intends to offer accommodation to Hoople so that the Serco staff can be located in Lincoln, that's going to maximise the chance of those experienced fire service payroll staff transferring across to the council. So that should be a great help, I think. And the model that's been used by Hoople in terms of having an experienced provider buddy up with them was what they used for onboarding the NHS payroll, which was a very successful exercise. That was back, I think, in 2011. So there is some track record there.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that staff can, if they do TUPE or transfer over to another employer, although we are a member of the board of the Techel company, that they can, there's a commitment they will be allowed to carry on working where they currently work in Lincoln, which I think is very important actually in terms of retaining those staff, and for those staff, of course, to have some reassurance.
Yes, and the reason for that was one of the reasons why we made it clear that that was the proposal in the report, which is in fact a public report. There is going to be engagement between Serco staff, with Serco managers being present and Hoople managers and LCC HR being present, and a date is just being arranged for that. We're expecting that to be in the next few weeks, an introductory session and reassuring staff that the location will be a Lincoln location.
Okay, move on then to, is it Customer Service Centre next? Or, yes, thank you.
Yes, Leader. So the next service area is the Customer Service Centre. The recommended option for that is for another outsourcing. The CSC is a reasonably complex logistical exercise because it regards call prediction and staff scheduling, because volumes of contacts vary on a monthly, daily and hourly basis, and as we've just been discussing, it can be difficult to retain and to recruit staff. There is a commercial marketplace for the CSC, and we've engaged with that marketplace. We've had a couple of rounds of engagement now, and we've had positive feedback around the way we intend to structure the procurement. So we're reasonably confident that we're going to get a competitive procurement exercise. There will be enough bidders to make that happen. Insourcing replace an operational burden on the council and would increase the volume of change that we would have to manage in March 2024. And it's for those reasons that insourcing is not recommended. In terms of digital transformation, the recommendation is that the council will be responsible for that digital transformation in the CSC and in the wider council, to make sure it happens and at a pace and cost that the council is comfortable with. The reality is that we will need to buy in some transformation expertise and capacity on a case-by-case basis, and this is the approach that most other councils are taking. In the past, when we've tried to outsource transformation in one block, we've had very disappointing results with that. So I'm going to pause again.
Sure, yeah. I think the starting point of our discussion was that this is a key exercise. The customer service centre is critical to the smooth running of the county council, and when things go wrong in the customer service centre, that there are problems for our citizens. So that's the first important point, that how important it is that we have a smooth transfer. The second point really is we would welcome more information about the 9 businesses that have expressed an interest in relation to their experience of handling transformations. In other words, yes, they're doing the business now and probably doing it very successfully, but we would be interested in knowing how the transformation went. That doesn't mean just talking to the businesses, but to the local authorities concerned. On the strong side, we recognised it was important to keep control of key technology and the management of calls, and we wanted to avoid the challenges. So how could we avoid the challenges of recruiting and retaining staff, which is the same problem essentially that we and Serco have to deal with at the moment. So in one sense, the outsourcing doesn't make the situation any better by transferring it to another business.
That, and obviously currently is outsourced, so we're aware we're not, this isn't new, and it's a question of whether the choice was whether to insource or test the market effectively and see what comes back. So questions, comments, please. I think that would seem to be the most pragmatic way. Has anybody got anything to add? Nope. Okay, Sophie, so we move on to the last bit, is it?
Yes.
One more section of various.
Sorry, Leader, I just wanted to comment on something that Councillor Parker raised, because whilst it's absolutely right that we've had a lot of interest, we've had 9 expressions of interest in our market engagement, when we actually look at the fit of those providers and their past performance, it's likely that that 9 will be reduced quite significantly. We still believe there will be 3 or 4 providers who've got the social care experience we're looking for. So we think there's going to be a valid procurement, but I just wanted to sort of update Councillor Parker from where we got to at OSMB, just through the market engagement work we're continuing to do. Of those who we think would be a good fit, we are going to be taking up their references at an early stage and speaking to councils to see what their experience is, because that will help us in the way we shape the procurement. So, sorry, I'll move on now to the adult care, finance and Exchequer services. So there's no commercial marketplace for finance services on their own, and the recommendation is that we should insource those services. Over the last 18 months, working with Serco, it's the council who has led on a review of adult care debt process and preparations for the adult care social care reforms, which will significantly change and increase the council's responsibilities. That work has shown the need for greater council visibility and proactivity across adult care charging and income recovery, both for the benefit of service users, but also critically for us to manage our budget. Insourcing the service will enable us to respond effectively to the changes that are coming, and it will also enable us to maximise income recovery. So I'm going to pause there.
The last point that Sophie mentioned about the adult social care reforms was central to our discussion, in the sense that at a time, it's about management really. When we insource something at a time of great national change, then there may be issues, and I think the point was made that we would be interested in monitoring this on an ongoing basis. And secondly, that the point about recruiting staff, which we know is difficult in adult social care as it is in children, may well be maximised with this issue. So it's a question of us saying we'd like to keep a watching brief on it.
Questions, comments? Again, I think it's pretty, you know, there is no market, and I think it's one area probably where we more control, but I think very much the point that there is all the changes in legislation are going to be a challenge, and but even though Councillor Burkett, I think you're getting on well with trying to navigate the new world, aren't you?
We are trying very hard to navigate the new world, yes, and yeah, we are getting there, aren't we? So yeah, it will be fine, I'm sure.
I'm sure you're right. Yeah, so that again, I think that's pretty useful. In terms of costs, I mean, the report does say, notwithstanding the issue about we're doing our own transformation, and there will be a cost there. The estimate is that the cost will be approximately in the same range that we currently pay. That's the presumption at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, that is the presumption. We've set out the reasons for that in the report. They're at page 42 and 43, but we're not expecting the new commissioning arrangements of themselves to make a difference to the costs, a material difference to the cost, either up or down. For those outsourced services, we might expect to see an increase reflecting inflation, because I think we're expecting to see that across the board, but not because of the commissioning arrangements in themselves.
Any further comments, anybody? Yes, Councillor Woody.
Thank you. I suppose it's just seeking reassurance, and Sophie, slightly unfair, but are we making sure that we've got a digital offer? That 20,000 is an awful lot of people, and there will be a number of those for whom an assessment may not apply at a very early stage, or at least they may be able to have an assessment, but it will soon become apparent that any support may not apply. So are we working alongside at the same time with our digital colleagues to make sure that people can help themselves to see whether they're eligible or not?
I don't have the answer to that question, but I can certainly get back to you with it. Apologies. Oh, thank you, Councillor Beckett.
So I think a lot of the people that will come and enter this asking for help, a lot of them, they don't need help, but they just need a bit of navigation. So no, that certainly is part of it, yes.
So, I mean, obviously there's a technology side of this, because obviously whether it's insourced or a provider, I mean, could you just give a brief update on how we're progressing with the sort of making sure our IT systems and processes are being modernised?
Yeah, so there's plenty of work going on that, Leader, at the moment. So we're currently formulating an update to our telephony provision, which we'll be seeking to discuss with members in forthcoming months, and likewise in terms of our continued development and usage of things like customer relationship management systems, for example, key part of this, again linked to that telephony project, but also as well, you know, I've heard use of, Councillor Woolley used the words digital, so it's better use of the web as well to ensure that we can minimise costs coming through things like the customer service contract as much as we can, but by making sure people use the most effective platforms for themselves. But again, it's always a continued work in progress, given the rapid advances in digital world and I guess consumer expectations as well.
Thank you. I suppose finally, obviously, we are talking here about lots of people's livelihoods and jobs. So just how we're going to keep staff and staff, not our own staff, but also contracted staff, up to date of what's going to happen next.
We've brought in a dedicated programme director, Mike Hedges, who I think the executive have met, who is working full-time on the implementation activity, and part of that is a communications programme. So there's already been lots of communication with LCC staff in the relevant service areas and also with Serco staff, so they are kept informed of what's happening, and so that the information is presented to them in an accessible and personalised way, rather than just them seeing it in a public report. And that engagement will continue. We're already, as I indicated, arranging meetings between Hoople and Serco, so that the Hoople's managers can effect that introduction, and we would expect that to continue throughout really the next 2 years, with greater intensity towards the end as we start to look at consultation processes and things like that. So it is a priority. We do recognise how critically it is important it is to retain those staff currently working in Serco in the delivery of our services.
I think you're right, because obviously we've just talked about retaining staff and all the rest of it. So there's a risk here, but I think with those who are currently contracted under Serco, we do need to rely on have a good relationship. I don't know what else you can say, Debbie.
Just really to add that, communication both with our wider workforce as well as the staff who will be affected, who are employed by others. It's really important that we have regular communication, and certainly subject to a decision today, I intend to write to all staff to let them know of the decision that's made at executive today as well, to make sure that staff are informed.
Thank you. And just to summarise, if we agree these recommendations, what the next steps are, please, Sophie?
Well, we've started to prepare for the implementation of the decision. Mike Hedges is producing a programme of activity, so we can see all the different tasks associated with all the different commissioning solutions that we're coming up with. That will be again set against a timeline. We know what the priority is. The priority in terms of timing is to issue the Csc Tender, and that's the first event effectively. We're hoping to do that in the late summer, early autumn. Activity has already started to commence on the market engagement, which will inform the way we put that tender together, and that will we'll put a commercial package together, which we will discuss with CLT and with the relevant members who are referred to in the recommendation, so you have sight of what we're doing. We're starting to put together early thoughts around what the client arrangements might be within the council, how we might manage these new relationships. We're going to start talking to Hoople about the agreement that we would want to put in place with them. So we understand the principles that underpin that already, which is that they will charge us the cost of delivering that service. So I'm not anticipating any difficulties there. We're already a member of Hoople, so that work has already been done, and we can take the benefit of that. We need to start pulling together the specifications for the IT services that will be outsourced, but that's a little bit later in the year, so work will be starting on that very shortly so that we can pull those documents together. And after that, we need to then start looking at the insourcing the phasing of that, whether phasing is an appropriate thing or whether it's better just to leave it as it is, all that discussion will take place with Serco, so that they are fully informed of everything that we're doing. Certainly I speak to Graham Beckett, who's their operational director, on a fortnightly basis at the moment, but a bit more regularly than I would normally do. So that's the general activity. And we will pull together, as I say, a complete overview of the programme, and that work is ongoing.
Thank you. Okay then, so unless anybody else has any other contributions, recommendations there on page 13, which is basically approve what's been just described by Sophie and co. There are 3 recommendations, so all those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So with that, thank you for attendance at this meeting, and you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.